Hello and welcome to Zestology. This is the podcast all about energy, vitality and motivation. I'm Tony Wrighton, walking down London's famous Portobello Road towards the market, and I've just interviewed Katie Brindle, Chinese doctor, a wellness expert and definite friend of Zestology as well. Before I go any further, apologies if I'm slightly rustling today, but it is very cold and I'm puffered up to the eyeballs. It is freezing. But this chat with Katie was so illuminating, and in particular we talk about overscheduling, something that I often have conversations about. I just feel like I need to put less in the diary at the moment. We talk about overscheduling, how that leads to stress, and how overscheduling and stress affect the body's circulation and energy flow and qi. And it all comes back to Chinese medicine, so absolutely fascinating, and Katie is definitely the right person to talk to about this. It feels like it's an affliction which only gets worse, not just with me, but I feel like the people that I know, the friends that I have as well. I just feel like we're more hectic than ever before. So we talk quite a bit about stress and energy and overscheduling, and how to just create a little bit more space in your day and in your life as well. Also on this podcast we talk quite a bit about Glastonbury and festivals, but that'll all become clear. And we also talk about the low-histamine diet. Katie is a big fan, it's made a big difference to her life, and histamine intolerance a little bit as well. And just eating a food that doesn't cause inflammation, eating a diet that frees up your body to do the best it can, which is definitely what I've found by not eating histamine heavy foods. So it's all coming up, and lots more as well, because there was so much to talk about. So it's pretty cold today. I'm gonna stop talking. I'll come back at the end of the podcast. I hope you enjoy this chat with Katie Brindle. Let's start with overscheduling, because I think that's quite a constant theme for me. I have conversations so often about how I just need to plan less. Yeah. Is that something that you think about as well?
Honestly, I think it's a modern day sort of epidemic. It's certainly something that I am so guilty of. And actually it reached a sort of point about a month ago where I thought, you know what, this is just ridiculous, because I'm so overscheduled that there's zero enjoyment of anything, because you just can't savour anything any longer. And it's also something I noticed in clinic, because whenever I see a patient, they're just always stressed, and when they start talking about their lives, they start effectively giving you a commentary on where we are as a society, which is family life, a very extended work life, a very high expectation of all the possibilities that we can actually have available to us, which in the old days simply weren't even there. And the net result is we're all flying around trying to cover all our bases and not necessarily actually having a good time in the process.
And everyone's saying the same thing, aren't they?
Yeah.
Everyone is overstressed, overbusy, got too many plans in, pushed at work, and then checking their email when they're not at work, and then not enough time for the family and everyone else and social life at weekends.
Right. And I think, the concept of kind of, less is more, but, savouring what you have. I mean, if I think back to like my nan, she's a good example, if she was doing something nice, you'd have the opportunity to actually A, look forward to it, and then B, relish it at the moment in time of whatever it was. Whereas I found in contrast in my life, it's just, I sometimes look at my diary and actually feel slightly sick, because I just think, oh God, if I actually look at the week I've got to get through, I can't actually cope. So I'm just going to focus on and get through today.
I feel stressed thinking about it.
Yeah. And
your diary makes me feel stressed.
I'm not surprised. I mean, it's just a bit insane. But I then decided to basically apply the concept of JOMO, joy of missing out, which annoyingly then became a thing after I thought of it. I was really annoyed because I thought, hang on, I thought that ages ago. But JOMO, I think, is such a great concept where you just basically become super discerning and you think, right, okay, I need to have bandwidth in my day for nothing, which in Chinese medicine is what we would call the yin, the rest. And the concept of just, I live in the country, so just sitting by the fire and just relaxing and just absorbing, everything that's been going on, rather than to feel the need to kind of, put my kids to bed and then rush out down to the local pub to meet X, Y and Z and do whatever it was. I've tried where possible to be really discerning about my diary and allocate in my day time where there's nothing to do. And that's actually golden time.
That bandwidth word is brilliant. I think, bandwidth takes energy. And when you have to, everything, when you've got 100 emails that you've got to reply to, that's bandwidth, isn't it? Or, when people want to meet and they say, hey, perhaps, I'll tell you what really annoys me.
Go on.
When people get in touch. It shouldn't. It's not very zestology.
Are we supposed to be venting in your zestology?
It's not very zestology, is it? But
no.
When people say, we'd like you to come on my podcast, and I would go on another podcast, and it's obviously good for me to promote zestology in another podcast. And then they say, let's have a chat next week, 15, 20-minute chat on the phone to discuss what we're going to chat about on the podcast.
You're joking. But we don't do that.
Let's just get on with it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think discernment and bandwidth, they're a crucial part of this whole process where basically I think, the concept of spending 20 minutes to pre-talk about something you're just going to talk about seems a bit unnecessary. Yeah. But I think it's also a reflection of where we're going in this modern culture where we expect things to just go at a pace where that sort of planning level is just disappeared now, because it used to be the case. People would have meetings about this stuff, but we don't anymore. Our expectations of the speed at which things can be executed, because I think technology is now so advanced, what it fails to recognise is actually the human body. Because in the old days, if we needed to make an arrangement to meet up, well, first of all, we couldn't do a podcast. That wouldn't happen anyway. But, you would write to me and I would write back to you. And that would take 2 days each way. And even with a fax, you have to type it up and then send it across and send it back. So in the last, sort of 15 years of our actual adult lives, the technology has now become, you email me, I check my emails, I email back, we make a date, boom, it's done.
Yeah.
So therefore the speed of the body naturally speeds up in accordance to the technology that we're responding to. Now, interestingly, in Chinese medicine...
That's a very good point.
It is.
So we're all speeding up.
Inevitably, because the expectation is you'll send me an email or I'll send you an email and I'll expect you to answer it. And because the email goes over straight away, you can answer it instantly, which is wonderful in so many ways. But on the other hand, the expectation, therefore what happens is the level of communication has increased exponentially. So in the old days, you might, if you watch Downton Abbey, they'll be having breakfast and the butler will bring in the Lord, four letters, and he will then go and attend to his morning letters after his breakfast, and then he'll sort of go for a walk.
Doesn't that sound lovely?
Well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I feel sorry for the servants, obviously, because it's a bit harder for them. But for him, and you think 4 letters, I've done that before I've even got out of bed in the morning. How about 40 emails?
Yes.
And the reality is what that does to the body is it's about the consumption of information. This is where things get interesting. So not only are we just exhausted by the biology of rushing around, that's one thing, but if we look at what that's doing to the insides of our body, in Chinese medicine, the liver, which is responsible for kind of the smooth flow of energy around the body, and therefore if you're rushing around, that the liver's going to sort of speed up. Everything speeds up when you're rushing, your circulation and the liver. But the liver opens to the eyes. And this is interesting because therefore the information that we're responding to comes in via the eyes. We're no longer really sensory adults where we're hunting. So we're kind of on red alert with our ears and our eyes and on our smell because we think we're going to get attacked. It's no longer like that. We're just at a desk. Our ears are relatively shut down. We might even be listening to music. So this is relatively desensitized. Yeah. But it's the eyes that are receiving everything. So if the email comes in and it's an aggressive email with a problem attached to it, which is work, that's what we're doing, then that goes into the eyes, it comes into the body, and it's the liver that then starts to kind of control the sort of response to what that is. Because what the liver will do in its left to its natural devices is spike the blood with glucose, ready for us to kind of act. And the liver is also responsible for anger and frustration, which are very quick emotions to be fired up. And they literally fire by the liver fire, and they raise upwards by the chi of the liver. So all of this is happening inside the body at great speed, because also the liver is going to respond to the fact that we're going flick, 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 flick with our eyes. Because what we're doing is looking at an email and digesting it and going, oh, no, I don't need that. No. Oh, no. Oh, what's this? Oh, my God, they didn't deliver the blah, blah.
Spike of anger.
Right, yeah. Oh, yeah. And then, got to deal with it. Oh, going to have to deal with that in a minute. The sigh, liver frustration. The liver chi is now stagnating, which is not good, because for that body to be healthy, what you're looking for is the smooth flow of chi and blood around the body, i.e., unimpaired circulation.
Yeah.
And that is key. And that's what you talk about all the time. The basic fundamentals of health is that you need that circulation. And the liver has a huge responsibility within that process. And if the eyes are receiving just like a deluge quantities of information, and then, by the way, we then go home onto, say, social media, and we're responding to, you know, all the yay me people out there who look like they're having the most amazing time. Meanwhile, my life sucks. You know, that's going to also create a massive emotional toll on my liver. So consequently, you've got all this kind of over-informed, over-scheduled, overwhelmed body, which is responding to modern life on the inside via the liver and on the outside via the mechanics of trying to get from A to B. And I think the other thing, interestingly, what happened this morning, because you got stuck on transport. Well, that's another condition of modern living, because our expectations of movement are so much higher than they used to be. You know, if we go to Jane Austen, you know, they go to London like once in a blue moon, and it'd take them 3 days to get there. So they would just walk to the village, and that would be that. Whereas for you to get to A to B, and for me, I have to come from Somerset, so I either have to drive for 2.5 hours or get the train, and then trains get lost and cancelled in the traffic. But my expectation is, actually, I could have driven in this morning, got up early, driven to London, met up, done this, done that, blah, 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 driven home again this evening. Think that's a huge journey.
Yeah.
That's 6 hours of driving.
Yeah.
But the expectation is, because I've got a car, I can do it. But the toll on the body in terms of what my eyes are, the information on my eyes and the physical movement of my body getting from A to B is hugely stressful.
Yeah,
and we need to
it
be
is.
aware
Yeah,
of it.
and also when you're driving, there's just the concentration element as well. I think one of these things about scheduling, which is quite interesting, and I thought this would be interesting to mention to you about the kind of the smooth flow of chi around the body, is something that I've noticed recently, which I've really tuned into, is that I've always had very bad circulation. And I noticed that my circulation is worse when I've been extremely busy and quite stressed. And for instance, at the moment I'm doing quite a lot of double shifts, for example. So I might go and do some voiceovers in the day, and then I might go and work at Sky. You know, Sky, I'm surrounded by about 400 screens until midnight. And I'll get into bed, and my hands and my feet in particular will be very, very cold. And on the days that I'm stressed, they'll be colder. And what I've started doing is, and it might sound a bit woo-woo, but I'm quite excited by this. Tapping, just almost with thought alone, making my feet and my hands warm, which is basically relaxation, a mantra, and imagining the kind of the smooth circulation of blood flowing into my feet, which shows that it has to be stress. It has to be this overstimulation, this overscheduling that's causing it.
Well, interestingly, okay, there's loads.
So I thought it'd be interesting to talk to you, because obviously circulation and the smooth flow is such an important part of what you do.
This is so interesting. Okay, so this is really interesting because, first of all, as you know, and this is how we've met, is that, you know, I've basically spent my entire professional life just obsessing about Chinese medicine, okay? And what I've understood is that people think Chinese medicine is herbs and acupuncture, okay, and it is, but there's like all this other amazing stuff, which is that's how we met, because, you know, you're like, oh, this is interesting, and it is. And if you distill the incredible, complex understanding of the human body that Chinese medicine offers us, just down to some really basic things that we can get our head around. The fundamental aspect of health is circulation. It's just got to move freely around the body. And if that happens unencumbered, the theory being that you don't get sick. Now, the next step is, of course, what's being carried in that circulation. Because if it's a diet of toxic food and toxic thoughts and not enough exercise and no oxygen, poor oxygen, not great circulation, but we can get to that afterwards. But the circulation needs to get there. And when we look at the stress response, which is one of the major problems, and, you know, I'm not going to go into telling everyone what they already know about stress, because that's boring, okay? But what's interesting is that the stress response completely and directly impacts the circulatory system. Why? Because the body takes the blood out of what it deems the peripheral organs, which is the skin and the digestion, and puts it in the muscles for fight or flight.
Right, of
that's
course.
It.
I mean, that's such a simple way of explaining it, but that is such a good way of explaining it.
Because it's true.
Okay, so basically my body is like,
stress.
So much going on at work, you got to really focus, let's take all the blood away from your toes and put it in the places where you need it most to run away from the target.
Right, well, there's two things. One, it's put it into the muscles, because what should be the stress, the body has evolved over thousands of millions of years, and this epidemic of modern living has only been in the last sort of really 50, because it's sped up in our lifetime. So we're talking a 50-year, so I'm nearly 50, so basically since the year I was born, this has been what's going on, so my life, right? And what's happened is that the body will put the blood into the muscles, because in theory, you're supposed to be running. So I use the Oxford Street analogy of, if you'd seen the number 19 bus, damn it, I need that bus. And you're pegging it down Oxford Street. And then you get to the bus, you go, oh, and then you get that, oh my God, I'm on the bus, I can get home. Phew, I've made it, well done me. But you've got 5 minutes. Then what's happened is the circulation's done what it needed to do, and it's now circulating again.
Yes.
You're taking deep breaths and you are resting. But we're not doing that, well, unless we need the bus. But other than that, we're sat at a desk. And therefore what's happening to you is, firstly, that the circulation isn't getting released again. That's problem A. But problem B is bodies are really clever. And if the circulation isn't that great, and most of ours isn't, if it's a little bit on the weak side, bad food, bad diet, bad oxygen, what it will do is it will focus on what it needs to do first. And the priority are the organs, because they keep you alive. Your feet are not a priority to the body. It likes them, but it's not an essential, nor is your hair. Okay, so this is why when people get things like arthritis, the issues go down normally to the extremities first, because the body will use the nuts and bolts there to keep everything has to be kept away from the organs at all costs, because organs will keep you alive. So if you're sitting at a desk and your food is a bit rushed and not that great because it's from a canteen, and you didn't go home and your wife didn't cook it for you fresh, from the garden, which is a rather sexist existence, but that's how it's been for the last 2,000 years. That's no longer the case. So what your body's doing is it's just dealing with the immediacy. It's overloaded, and just like it will prioritise, like we do with our to-do list. Like, right, hang on, I've got so much to do. What do I need to do first? Oh, this, right. And your body's doing the same. So it will draw the circulation away from the extremities and keep it in its torso to keep you alive. And the great thing about all this knowledge is this is not a woe is me situation, because there is an answer. And this is why...
I'm waiting for this bit.
Well, the answer is the tapper, which I know you love, because this is this bamboo tapper we've just brought out. And this, by the way, is not a sales pitch at all. You can do it with your hands. Okay?
There is an Instagram picture of me tapping.
You
with
look
your
great
tapper.
with it.
Yes.
Proper alpha male.
Really flaying myself.
Well, what you do is you have the tapper, say, in your bathroom, and before you go to bed at night, you give yourself a really good thorough tap. I mean, at the very least a minute, because, I find on my really busy days, on the busy days are the days you should do it more, but in reality, it's the opposite. So this morning was a particularly busy morning, and I got a minute. But when I have a bit longer, I'll go longer. But have it in your bathroom and just tap your whole body, especially for you, but do your feet.
Okay.
So yes, you're doing your shoulders.
Do my feet.
Do your feet. And the soles of the feet. You can literally, so you can do, I've got my foot out here. Yeah. That's me whacking my foot. And you see the kidney point is on the sole of your foot. If you scrunch the toes up, there's a kind of dip in the middle of the foot under the bump of the toes. That is the entry point to the kidney, which is responsible for the adrenaline and the aging process and your energy levels. So basically, Chinese people will tap all over their bodies. But the great thing about the tapper,
I just realised it's massively distorting the
really?
microphone. No, it's good. I thought that'd be a good bit of atmosphere in the background. Do a bit of tapping.
Oh, no, but everyone's wincing into their iPod, into their Apple earplugs. Yeah. But basically, the idea is that the way that the tapper is designed, because it's nice and long and light, that if you're pregnant, you can get down there. If you've got bad back, you can get down to your lower feet. You can reach the extremities of your back because it's easy.
And it gets the circulation going.
That's all it does. But when I say that's all it does, that's like saying, well, a toothbrush just clears plaque off your teeth. Yeah, that is all it does. But oh my goodness me, look at the benefit of that. We as a country, we as the entire global population, all expect to have our teeth our whole life. That is an expectation we all have. Whereas 100 years ago, back to my grandmother, when I was little and she was in her 60s, she had dentures. And that was the normality for her.
But she did have a walk after breakfast.
She did have a walk after breakfast. Bless my nan. But this is where toothbrushing, for example, has changed our approach to dental health. We totally understand that by brushing our teeth every day, we take the onus of our health, of our teeth, ourselves, and then we go and see the dentist as well. Mm-hmm. But we don't do it with our bodies.
Yes. That's so interesting.
Because it's true. Yeah. So when talking to someone like you who's so informed about so many things, I think what's missing in the bit that we're talking to everyone about is these really simple daily 1 minute thing that you can do that actually does the same thing as toothbrushing. And in my humble opinion, the tapper offers you that purely because it gets the circulation into the right places, and that is the fundamental basic of good health, just like brushing your teeth. Yeah. Then the add-on information after that is, okay, well, let's now look at the quality of your circulation. And that's where when I read, all your amazing content, you're talking about your low histamine programs and the fasting, all the amazing, and the supplements, and you think, yeah, that's all great, because that's the quality of the blood. But the first step is get the blood there in the first place. And it doesn't have to be because I'm going to the gym. Whatever anyone's choosing to do for their exercise routines, it's like, that's all great, whether you want massages or exercise programs every day. But having the tapper in your bathroom and tapping yourself for a minute in the morning and in the evening, just like brushing your teeth, is going to have untold benefits.
Right, that's really
health.
interesting, because I've had the tapper, your tapper, same one as that.
It's the only one. There aren't any other ones.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, great.
I know.
Oh, God, isn't that a good
like
idea for you?
First.
Brilliant, well done.
Thank you.
That's so good. Ours is downstairs, so I think I might put it in the bathroom.
Oh, no. Put it up in the bathroom.
Right.
Because the best way to tap is on naked skin.
Yes.
So just like your toothbrush is kind of in your morning and evening sort of, I'm getting ready for my ablutions. The tapper is made of bamboo. It's a natural product, and I'm not tapping it. Well, I'm just going to show
that's
you.
right. You can tap
I'm just
if you want.
merely placing the tapper, but can you feel the bamboo is cool? On the skin.
Yeah.
So whilst, yes, I'm going to be hitting with it,
Yeah.
but if you actually slow the process down, you can feel that bamboo, like jade, is cool to the touch.
Yes.
Okay, now that's useful, because what we're doing is not only getting the circulation back to where it needs to be, but actually what it's doing is clearing inflammation as well.
Yeah.
Which is why it's so useful, because if we then talk about, all right, the quality of what's going on with the blood, you and I were talking earlier about, your brilliant content about all the low histamine stuff, which is just like
I'm looking forward to coming on to that.
On the money. But ultimately, low histamine or high histamine and inflammation, as it's all bundled up into the same thing. It's all connected to this overstressed existence that we've all got. And Chinese medicine, or the self-care part that I preach, is all about clearing what we call heat, which is it's not absolutely the same, because you can't marry two completely polar opposite medical systems, but to largely, heat and inflammation are basically the same thing. And what Chinese self-practice will do is enable you to clear heat out of the body. And if you then take that knowledge and observe the world's natural kind of systems, like, for example, saunas followed by rolling in snow, for example, in Scandinavia, or Russian banyas, where you do the hot-cold baths, or hot-cold bathhouses in Asia, that's what they're doing. They're basically warming the body up. So tapping will warm the body up because you're percussing it, but the bamboo will be cooling it down simultaneously, and therefore allowing the heat to come out via the skin, which is what we want it to do, because the skin is the largest excretory organ. So it's so important to concentrate on what you're putting on the inside, i.e. your diet and your supplements and your thoughts and everything, but equally to use the excretory function of the body to allow it, to enable it to do its job, because we are overwhelming our body at the moment. Because of overscheduling, we're overwhelmed. Too much information, too much food, too much rushing around, too much. Everything's just too much. So therefore, we've got to help our bodies clear it out more than we would normally have to do.
As well as scheduling less, I think. But that one's hard, isn't it?
Scheduling less.
I mean, it's just hard. I keep saying, we need to organise less, but it's just difficult.
It's hard. I think what I've found is actually, what I find interesting is that podcasting has kind of opened up a really strange social outlet.
Yes.
Because now we become friends because we podcast together at the expense of, I don't know, someone I used to know who I now don't have time to have a coffee with.
Well, it's great, and we're not checking our phones. We're just sat in here, just focused on one thing.
Yes,
and it's just nice, isn't it?
Yes, because it's help. I think because it's helpful, because we're so passionate about what we're talking about that we know that the people who are naturally going to listen to this are going to find it interesting, because it is. Yeah. Because it's
we are.
Well, we are, and I don't care if no one listens. If anyone's listening to this, it's fine. I'm happy to talk about it anyway.
But by the way, talk about scheduling. The last time we recorded a podcast, you'd just been to Glastonbury.
Had I?
And then I think you flew off the next day. And
to New York.
I meant to ask you about that, because we've got Glastonbury tickets for next year. Are you going?
I am.
Are you?
Yay!
Fantastic.
Oh, we need to do a podcast.
Good, we'll do one there.
Yeah, early on.
Brilliant, early on.
Early on, not too late in the day.
Great. I mean, it was hard getting tickets, I have to say. We were in a syndicate of 30 of us.
Wow.
And only 6 of us got tickets. And a woman called Karen, who I've never met, bought my ticket for me. So thank you, Karen.
Oh.
But really excited about it.
Well, Glastonbury's brilliant.
Did you camp in the family field?
No, I have to be honest. I don't camp. I don't glamp. I don't do anything.
Well, you live quite near, don't you?
I live really near. So basically, I drive in.
Do you really?
I do.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
I basically drive in. I either drive in or taxi in and out.
Is that possible then?
Of course. Come and stay. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just wondering about the logistics because we're kind of, we're going to go full camping, I think.
Well, camping is great, except my children laugh at me because I'm not a prima donna by any means, but my body is just, I'm sorry, but I'm nearly 50 and I've just got, why do I keep saying, you know what, I say my age so often because gua sha is so amazing for your skin. I love the reaction and everyone goes, oh, really?
Yeah.
But you look so good. I go, I know, it's the crystals. I'm the only woman that slightly exaggerates her age. Okay, I'm actually 47.
Hey
but
guys,
I up
guess how old I am.
Literally, when I'm on QVC, I go, well, I'm nearly 50 because it kind of ups it. I think, am I the only woman in the whole world that actually pretends she's older than she actually is? But anyway.
You do look very good for 47.
Thank you. It's because of the crystals. Why?
And a few vampire facials as well.
No, I don't have them.
No,
this is the thing. This is why the press actually like my honesty, because I used to be the person that would indeed have Botox and vampire facials and lasers. I was in that market because I naturally don't have particularly great skin. I'm okay. I'm not what do I call myself? I'm not a genetic goddess, okay? I'm just all right. I'm okay. So that makes me a really good embodiment of an example to other okay people, which by the way is most of us. I mean, we're not all looking like Gwyneth Paltrow, I certainly don't. But so the idea of the gua sha crystals is what they do. They do the same thing as the tapper, but just for the face, because they're just encouraging circulation that feeds the skin.
Well, my girlfriend Faith has been doing the same thing.
She likes it?
She loves it.
Well, and also it feels
I haven't
nice.
been using it.
Why aren't you using it?
I don't know.
Come on.
She said to me this morning, she said, oh, tell Katie I love it.
Good.
I
Well,
use it
you
every
need
day.
your own crystals.
Well,
You can share.
yeah, we can share.
I mean, technically
can't we?
you shouldn't,
Yeah.
but you can.
Really?
Well, I mean, there is technically hygiene on these things because you are rubbing them into your skin.
Right.
But let me tell you, I'll go downstairs and find one of my kids has nicked it off my bathroom, and then she's stroking the dog with it, and the dog's lying there like this, going, "Oh, this is so nice." So we're not that great at my house either.
Look, back to Glastonbury.
Yes,
tactics.
back to Glastonbury.
So you think, because I mean, I've always enjoyed in the past a festival where you can stay nearby and pop in, or a festival where you can get in and out quite quickly. And the festivals I tend to go to now, the smaller ones, really small ones actually. Glastonbury is just mega, isn't it? It's huge. So is it possible to actually get into the site and drive in and go for the day and then pop home in the evening?
Yeah, talk about overscheduling. First of all, Glastonbury itself is a scheduling nightmare because it's so huge. Like, oh, what am I? You get FOMO.
Yeah.
Oh, and then you spend ages moving from A to B. But that said, it's so great. It's worth it. So, and this is where actually the scheduling comes in. It's like, okay, let's be realistic here. Are you going with your baby or are you just going?
Yes, we're going with the baby. Yeah.
Okay. So that changes the entire thing.
Yeah.
Because then you see these people going, I'm just going to take my kid and go to the festival. And they're lugging this poor child around in this kind of...
I know, this is what I'm worried about.
I really wouldn't do that. I mean, it's up to you, obviously. But
in the wheelbarrow?
Yeah, the baby's got the earplugs on and kind of looking exhausted. And the pill parent's thinking, I actually want to go clubbing and I can't because I've got my baby. So actually it's not that great. So
well, apparently the stuff for kids is great as well.
Yeah, but you'll be doing that the whole time. So you are going to go to Glastonbury to do children's things because your baby is not interested in going to the silent disco or the, I don't know, Fatboy Slim event that's going on up the road in the John Peel tent.
So what we could do is stay around the corner, go in a couple of days with the baby, and then a couple of days one of us could stay out and the other one could just go mad.
Or get
a babysitter.
Get a babysitter, and actually go and have a good time. Because if you've got a Glastonbury ticket, and the thing I remember this, I did this before with my children, and I took them to a festival. And by the way, obviously we live in an age of total free choice, and I'm sure lots of children, my children, are not those kind of free-spirited kind of kids. That's probably because mummy here has already said to the worldwide that actually I won't glamp or camp. So therefore they've probably inherited my genes because I like being in my bed. And the problem is, as a Chinese doctor, is I know all the things that, if you're in damp conditions or it's wet, I know what it does. Yeah. And I can't unknow this stuff. So consequently, I'm not 21. If I was 21, it wouldn't bother me that I was swilling around in mud and not sleeping very much. But at the age that I'm at, I don't want to be in that position, so I'd rather just go home. And funnily enough, when I took
a good night's sleep and you go back to a festival the next day, you feel brilliant. I've done that a few times at wet festivals. Yeah. And your mates are camping in the mud and they're sleeping in half an inch of water. And you go back the next day, have 8 hours and then fry up in a B&B and you are ready to go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So perhaps maybe think if you've been lucky enough to get the Glastonbury ticket, perhaps consider it could be a time for you and your partner to actually just have a good time. Yeah. And then maybe that doesn't involve having a baby who will never remember this experience. He's 1, right? He's going to be 1.5. He will. The only recollection he will have is trauma because basically he's not sleeping.
Trauma, come on.
Well, I mean, okay, maybe I'm exaggerating slightly, but it's there's thousands and thousands of people. Yes. It could be really boggy and you'll be lugging him about. Yeah. And you're going to want to do whatever you're doing, and then the distances are enormous. So if you want to get back to your campsite because let's say I don't know, there's an issue. You could be up to an hour's walk away from where your campsite is with a crying baby that's traumatised by whatever.
Yeah.
And the reality is that's what you've got to do. So it's totally fine. It just means, is that actually an enjoyable experience?
Maybe we need to book into that lovely pub in your village, the Talbot.
The Talbot.
And then just drive in from there. I love the Talbot.
Or Babington and helicopter. That's what the absolute A-list. We see the helicopters going on from our house. We're like, oh, pick us up.
Do they really?
Oh, yeah, non-stop, forwards and back.
How far is it from there to...
by helicopter about 5 minutes.
But to drive from Mells to...
nothing, like 40 minutes, including the parking.
Okay, and the parking is not too bad if you drive for the day.
If you get a ticket, you are eligible, I'm pretty sure, to have a parking space, or just look into it. They're definitely there, because we've always had one.
Yeah, you just pop in for the day, pop home, fine.
Yeah.
God,
but you see the word,
this is very tempting.
When we go back to scheduling, popping makes it right.
Just popping.
I popped to the newsagents over the road from here. That's a pop. Driving to the Glastonbury Festival and getting there, that's an hour and a half.
Yeah.
That's a schedule.
Yeah.
So now we go, okay, now let's look at what we're doing. Okay, so perhaps we don't take the baby. So this is where we're looking about being discerning about our times. It's like, okay, so you've been lucky enough to get a ticket. They're like gold dust. Okay, so what are we going to do with this? Am I going to give myself a day at the end of the festival to recover because I will be tired? Okay, that's a good idea. I will clear my diary. What I won't do is what I did last year, is go, I need to fly to New York. And I find myself at 5 o'clock in the morning in the healing fields thinking, I've got to get on a flight in 6 hours. And then think, I better pop...
in the healing
fields. I was sort of sat there thinking, I need to move. And basically, so I needed to pop home and go and pop to New York. So I basically had to leave the healing field. It took me an hour and a half to get to the taxi rank, and then followed by another hour to wait for a taxi, followed by go home, pack, drive to the Heathrow Airport and get on a flight. And then the next thing I woke up in the Mercer in New York City, literally thinking, this time 24 hours ago I was in the healing fields. And this is the reality of modern living, that the availability to move oneself from there to there is available. So suddenly I'm thinking, am I actually enjoying this Glastonbury Festival? Because actually in my back of my mind I'm thinking, I've got to be in New York tomorrow. Yeah. So perhaps what I should have done in hindsight was give my ticket to somebody that I did, but basically gave my ticket to somebody else and then enabled them to actually enjoy the festival and have a really good time, whilst I just focused on what I needed to do, which was go to New York and do what I needed to do there and enjoy that experience. So when it comes to discernment, if you're lucky to have the ticket, then think about the experience that you're going to have. How much time do you want to spend driving there and back? Do you want to have your baby with you so that effectively your festival experience is in relationship to that relationship? Or is it okay for your baby to perhaps be with its grandparent for that weekend, and that you as a couple actually use that as an opportunity to just be a couple for a weekend, which might be quite nice for mummy and daddy, or not. And the thing is, we live in an age of discernment, so there's no right or wrong answer to that. The answer is just be realistic about how you're going to spend your time. And if what we're saying is that modern life is so busy and we're under so much pressure that if you're lucky enough to have a nice invitation to do something lovely, perhaps we need to just sit back and savour it and change the language a bit and go, okay, we won't pop there, we're going to drive there.
Yeah.
Actually, we're going to commute there. It's actually quite a long way. So actually, what we're going to do is recognise that we're only going to be in the festival for X hours, and then we're going to have a nice meal and relax and watch telly in our nice room in the Talbot for the evening, and just enjoy the relaxation, knowing that we're going back into the activity the next day.
Yeah. That's a great little Glastonbury chat that we've had there.
Well, it's kind of Glastonbury / everything. I think from a Chinese perspective, everything comes down to balance. So circulation is yes, but it's also about balancing everything. And our lives are to yang, which is the action bit. Yang is activity. It's like heat and motion. And actually what needs to happen now as a global population and for our own bodies is we need to encourage the yin. And the yin is the stillness and the quiet. And it's been a much overlooked commodity, that kind of American sort of, the American dream thing that came through from the 1950s, which is brilliant in so many ways, has kind of infiltrated our population to that kind of the prizing of the hero and the action movie and getting things done. And I'm really pumped up. Today's going to be a great day. I'm going to live my dream and get what I want. And this is all wonderful. Of course, we live in an age where this is possible, but not at the expense of ourselves, because our yin is a vital commodity that eventually comes to an end, and that's the end point of your life. So if you burn through your yin reserves too quickly, you'll age, and then nothing's enjoyable when you're not feeling very well. So if you look at the Chinese masters, what they would do is they would preserve their yin in order to experience a long and healthy life. Well, that to me, I don't necessarily need to have a long life over and above about 90 odd years, but I'd like a healthy one. I look at my father, who's now in his late 70s, having a really great time. He flies all over the world with, my mother died, so he's got a new wife now. And, they're always off on bridge holidays and, the cruises, on the Baltic Sea. All the things that they like to do, because they're healthy.
Yeah.
But the minute they're not healthy at late 70s, they're stuck at home with painful joints and bad digestions and needing nursing and having to go in and out of hospital. And that's not such a great story. So and
the foundation for that starts
now,
whatever age you are listening.
If you're
now.
5 years old, your son right now,
Just interrupting this podcast for one moment to remind you that it is brought to you by Sunlighten Saunas, and scientific studies have shown that not only do infrared saunas help with natural pain relief during treatment, but even after months of ending a sauna treatment, the pain is still significantly lower. Did you need more reasons to try a sauna, and specifically a Sunlighten sauna? I mean, if you need one more reason, I do have Netflix in there too. But perhaps that's a slightly shallow reason compared to the fact that your pain relief could be gone, or your pain could be relieved months after ending a sauna treatment. Check out Sunlighten Saunas, mention Zestology for £200, $200 off, and now back to the podcast.
And I think that's really interesting about Glastonbury as well. The last time I went to Glastonbury was 1998, where we climbed over 2 fences and under 1 fence.
Are you allowed to say this on the podcast?
Well, I think it was pre kind of ID checks at Glastonbury.
Yeah, I bet it was. Hence the ID checks.
The funny thing is that I remember we got there, I think on the Thursday or something like that, and there was not an inch of land in any of the kind of camping spaces in Glastonbury. So we basically had to pitch up in the next farmer's field. We woke up the next morning and that whole field was packed. And you walked around the place, and I barely spoke to anybody who'd actually paid for a ticket at that Glastonbury. So they had to bring in these kind of ID checks.
Of course they did. Now it's really strict.
Disclaimer, I was, student, didn't have much money to pay for it. But more recently, I've actually quite enjoyed going to festivals which are a little bit smaller, a little bit more about wellness. I've been to Latitude a couple of times, and Yoga Connects, which was near you actually in Glastonbury, but not at the Glastonbury site. And so it'd be interesting going back to Glastonbury, which is a much bigger festival than I've been to in years, and much more about the hedonism as well, and kind of really, going wild for a few days. It'd be quite interesting to see how I enjoy that.
Well, I think, I like to, because we're in the local area, I'm lucky enough to get to go. Also because I'm quite involved with Greenpeace, so I'm lucky enough to sort of get in through them anyway.
Great.
Yeah, so that's.
So would you volunteer for a couple of hours at their tent?
No, we're more at donor level. Donor level. So we're on a sort of. Well, no, we are. Well, in fairness, I work really hard to give my money to Greenpeace. Trust me.
Great. Listen, that's brilliant. Well done. Yeah. And if you get Glastonbury to get out of it. Well done.
Well, that was basically when we signed up with them. That was my only request, because they're always asking us.
We're more at donor level.
Well, no, I know, but honestly, they're always sending us saying, "Oh, this is happening. Would you like to be a guest?" Yes. And we're like, literally, no time. And when I said to look, there's only one thing, please. I don't want them for free. I just want to be able to access a ticket.
Yes.
And basically, because Greenpeace is such a huge. They're Greenpeace and Glastonbury were one of the same thing right at the beginning. It was very much a Greenpece gig. So and my kids have to volunteer. I send them in, and then and by the way, they're brilliant. Happy to do so.
Yeah,
yay
God.
Greenpeace.
Well, also, I bet they get to meet so many people, many more than they would if they were just trudging around in their lives.
Greenpeace. Honestly, I can't rave about Greenpeace enough, which is a whole other kind of conversation. But certainly at Glastonbury, their stage anyway is brilliant, and their message is brilliant, and it's a festival which is very much celebrating the natural world. And goodness me, again, if we talk about our lifetime, I remember watching nature programmes when I was a little girl about, lions in the wild, and they were properly in the wild, and that's all changed.
Yes.
And someone's got to fight the fight, and we have to help them.
Yeah.
So going to the festival is really good about that, because it does take you out of your life. That's the point of it. To put you into a slightly altered environment, which is a kind of celebration, in order to kind of think about these bigger things. I find that, certainly running my brand, that when I go to these festivals, it gives me an opportunity to really kind of see things from a different perspective, which help me bring it into the normal world that I occupy, where I am.
It's freeing up the bandwidth, isn't it?
Right. That's the point of it. It is a celebration of the mind. You need to allow your mind to open up. Now, that doesn't, by the way, necessarily involve drugs. I'm sorry, I'm just going to be honest. But it just involves just being in an altered environment. And in traditional cultures, that would have been a church or a temple. And you're looking at lights, smells, sounds. This is, if you go to high church, you would have had incense burning, interestingly, which incense is frankincense. That's the ingredient in our bathing products because it clears inflammation. The stained glass windows because it gives you a different sense of light and different perspective.
Group worship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chanting.
Yeah.
Music.
Yes.
And literally the whole point of it was to basically create an altered spiritual state for you to basically see your life from a different perspective. And because I do go to Ibiza and festivals and things, when I'm observing what's going on around me, I'm in what's going on, but I'm also observing it because I know what I know. And I always find it so fascinating because I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because we are in a relatively secular kind of society, certainly in England anyway.
Yes.
I mean, I know we are multicultural, of course, and we have multiple religions, which is all marvellous. But as a general rule, we don't quite go to church quite as often or temples as much as we used to as a national population. And then what you notice is that people are seeking it elsewhere. And that's what's so lovely. And what I love about festivals, we go back to our topic of scheduling, is that actually it brings in fluidity because you can just amble about and go, what should we do? And you look at the thing and you go, oh, Fatboy Slim's playing. I'll go over there. All right then. And then there's a load of people jumping about and having a good time. And you get to sort of celebrate your life in a really fluid way and see the world from a different perspective, which is what we used to do when we went to churches. It was all too structured in the old days. But we're looking for the information. We're looking for the feeling. And we're looking for that experience because, life's really tough. I think that's why we talk, because it's hard. It's really hard. We're all trying to navigate our way through children and families and ageing parents and small babies and, equal rights for male and female partners. And when the baby comes along, that shifts everything again. And how does the female go back into the workplace if she's doing the baby? Or how does the man fit into that if he is? How are they perceived in the playground with other parents? All of this stuff is kind of stuff that we as human beings are navigating on top of a working day which is no longer 8 hours, it's more like 12, and the expectation that our commute to work, if going smoothly, is at least an hour a day because of house prices, and if not smooth, becomes a 2-hour nightmare where we're trying to work, and that's the reality of where we are. Yeah. Which is an interesting thing where you go into the festival concept where it's just you enter into this environment, this world, and you just kind of bob about.
Yeah, and particularly I think, my life over the last year has changed so much becoming a parent where, that thought of just kind of strolling around, whether it's at a festival or on holiday and saying, what should we do for the next hour? What should we do for the next couple of hours? That doesn't really happen that much at the moment, which is making me think as well, it would be quite nice to get Granny involved.
The thing is, again, if you look at because I know I advocate Chinese medicine because that's my discipline of learning. But Chinese medicine was just one version of natural medicine, which is all over the world. Okay, so what Chinese medicine preaches was what everyone did. Just from the Chinese perspective. So the same thing was in this country, we just sort of killed it all off over history, and now we've forgotten it even existed. But back in the day, children were brought up more by communities. The micro family didn't exist. We go to Bequia, which is an island in the Caribbean. We're there a lot because of my husband, and they have a saying that it takes a community to bring up a child, and the fluidity of children between aunties and uncles and extended family, or just simply the community itself, goes on. And as a population, certainly in the UK, that has now changed entirely, and it's now the sole role of the parents to basically bring up their children with perhaps a little bit of help from granny and grandpa. But it puts a huge amount of pressure.
It is really hard, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. Because actually what you'd like to be able to do is for your baby to go and stay by its aunt and uncle who've got children roughly the same age, so it's happy playing with its extended family, or best friend, or godparent, or whatever, so that mummy and daddy can actually just reconnect and have a nice time too, and not only be parents.
And of course, when they live 3 hours away, it's not possible, and
here we go scheduling again. Oh God, right! In order to get to Glastonbury, so grandma lives now in here, and so we've got to drive there, drop the child, then
get an Airbnb.
And it all gets so complicated, and then you're sitting in traffic. And then ultimately the whole thing becomes so stressful. We think, do you know what? It's just too much. We'll just stay where we are and just go to soft play. And then that's just a bit of a shame, isn't it? 'Cause it's...
one of the things we've said is, we really want to kind of work on creating more of a community really close to us. Because it's lovely having your best friends all around London and around the country, and my family as well. But it's just so easy when you ring your mate with a baby 3 doors down and say, do you want to go for a coffee?
Oh,
and then you don't have to schedule it in. It's just, it's Saturday morning, we've got nothing in, let's just go and meet them.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that's, I think, where the community really, again, we'd have community centres and things. It's interesting, isn't it? Because social media is effectively a reflection of our lives. and it's organising itself according to the zeitgeist of because that's what it's like. Nature, the strong is coming through, and what's noticeable is that it's the discernment and the sort of articulation of information, so that people will say follow you because of your message and your brand, or they'll talk to me because they're interested in Chinese medicine specifically, or both of us because they're interested in both things, and then you cross-pollinate. But ultimately, social media is reflecting the fact that we're living in these kind of small silos of communities. So somehow or other that has to be reflected in our physical state.
Yeah.
So again, when we were talking about overscheduling, so at the beginning we were talking about the physical rushing around and also the internal flow of communication. Well, it's the same thing. So somehow we can, as social media reflects our lives need to reflect social media. Somehow these communities of people need to kind of connect themselves geographically as well as socially online. So suddenly, if it'd be such an interesting thing to know, for example, if you've got, 10,000 followers, okay, could we do a Google map where there's dots and we can see where most of them live? And how many of those people live actually quite near you? Because then could you not have things that kind of grow off the back of that?
Exactly, yeah.
But I don't think, it's something that could kind of, it's weird how social media has effectively been created to reflect us, and then in return we need to respond back in turn to that in order to recreate communities.
Yeah.
Because I would be happy leaving my child in a community of like-minded people, because you know that they'd be influencing your child in a way that you agree with. What I wouldn't necessarily do is just drop my baby in, just like a random place because they happen to be geographically up the road.
Yeah.
And then that's a bit of a substandard because they might be talking about some kind of fascist opinions or something which I vehemently disagree with, for example. But I don't quite know. I don't have an answer.
Yeah. Well, talking of social media, we've got a few minutes left, and the histamine intolerance thing I wanted to talk to you about, because this is my kind of passion project.
Yeah.
I discovered that I had histamine intolerance about a year ago, and it's made a huge difference to my life. Always had a dodgy belly, always had kind of inflammation, couldn't quite work out why, and it's just got so dramatically better, thank you, since I've started looking into histamine intolerance and started eating a low histamine diet and taking low histamine supplements as well, or histamine reducing supplements. So I started this website, which is very much a passion project, and I'm going to put this podcast, because it's kind of like a sister site to Zestology, if you like, histamine-intolerance.net. And you have been following a low histamine diet as well, is that right?
Oh my God, it changed my life.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it was just, I'm such a fan of it. I can't believe it's weird that we knew each other anyway, and then suddenly this kind of stream had come in common, because it wasn't something that I knew much about. Stumbled across it.
Nobody does.
No, and yet it's the answer to so many, not to absolutely everyone, but it's a really good diet to follow.
Yeah.
Just because basically, weight has always been a problem for me. So like if I have an imbalance that pops up, if yours was say a dodgy tummy, mine is it just goes to fat cells. And just so even on my Instagram, you can kind of notice my it's not huge, but it's kind of expand, contract. I don't
think that's true.
Well,
maybe
it's a 3 kilo. Honestly, I say to my husband, because we were saying earlier that I put on a lot of weight after the twins were born, because my body was totally overstressed from a pregnancy which it didn't want, because I had donor eggs. And forced a body of secondary infertility to actually have 2 children at once as opposed to none at all. And I had to pay a price for that. And conventional dieting and exercise got me down to 13 stone. And then I stuck, and nothing, not even fasting got rid of it. Literally, I went on a 10-day fast, and didn't lose any weight at all. I mean, how demoralising is that?
No way.
No, I'm not joking, not one. Actually, that's not true. I lost 1 kilo, which the minute I had so much as, half a piece of toast, went straight back on.
How extraordinary.
Yeah, well, so on I go, kind of thinking, well, how do I do this? And it was the low histamine program that it was that, plus obviously the tools that I talk about, they also lower inflammation and histamine, that because the technique of gua sha, that's what it does. So that works at sort of body fat level. But from an internal level, when we were talking about, it's all about circulation, and then it's quality of circulation. Okay, so the tools deal with getting the circulation. The low histamine program is addressing the quality of circulation. Because if all the histamine sensors in the blood are so high, the body inflames. And that's the inflammation, which in your case was going into the gut, and in my case was going into the fat cells. So it's in the old days, because we weren't quite so epidemically stressed and overscheduled as the way we are now, a low inflammation diet would have been okay, which is basically healthy eating. Plenty of fresh fish and fruit and vegetables, nuts for snacks, all that stuff, which I was doing. It didn't make the slightest bit of difference. I was like, and if I so much as had like one piece of cauliflower cheese at lunchtime on a Sunday, or one spoon of ice cream for my child, it was like £3 went on. You think, this isn't fair.
Yeah.
That's not calories in versus calories out. I went to the gym this morning. What's going on? So the reality is that the low histamine diet is like a anti-inflammatory program plus, because we are inflamed plus. So we've got to do more. And interestingly, on your site, obviously you talk about all the foods that you mustn't have. And on there is nuts.
Yeah.
And so basically the bottom line is the antihistamine diet is anything that's been sat around you can't eat.
Leftovers.
Leftover, anything,
What does Chinese medicine say about leftovers?
Well, okay, interestingly. So first, a lot, it's a topic of another conversation because there's always a lot to say. But bottom line is eating fresh.
Good.
Of course.
Yes.
Now, the human being is designed to eat food that's just been caught. That's what we're designed to do. In the wild, sexist as it is, your wife would be at home with your baby and you'd have gone out and caught a fish and she'd have foraged for some berries, and the kids, as soon as they're walking around, would start doing what they've got to do, and you would eat it that day. So it would be fresh food that's locally sourced, because it'd be out the back garden or out the local forest. I mean, I'm being really cliched here, but it's the truth. Whereas the reality is, and I say this when I talk to offices, if you think that getting up at 6 a.m. and stuffing in a bowl of cereal with soya milk and that's come out the fridge and rushing to the office on public transport and eating a lunch from Itsu with miso soup and sushi and then having a snack of nuts in the afternoon and then rushing home to some low calorie whatever it is, let's call it a stir fry. Let's say you've gone to M&S and you bought some salmon in a plastic package with cellophane over the top of it, with a bag of stir fry veg and a packet sauce, and you think that's a healthy diet. It's not. And that's the problem. There's so much misinformation out there that we are so misinformed about what's going on. The reality is that is not a healthy diet. It's better than a lot of other health. It's better than fish fingers and white bread and a microwave curry and a pint of beer. Of course it is. But if we are talking to healthy, conscious people here, and going to Itsu, nothing against Itsu, by the way, sorry Itsu, but I'm using the example of things being put into plastic and sitting around for long periods of time.
Especially fish, actually.
Yeah, especially fish.
Fish increases in bacteria very quickly.
Fast, which is why if you look at Japan, which has one of the ultimate low histamine, well, actually it's not totally because they have fermented foods, but if you take that bit out, if you look at we said earlier, high quality cuisine across the world, they prize themselves on small portions and very high quality ingredients.
Right.
And guess what? You feel full, you don't feel stuffed, you stay healthy, and you don't get fat. Oh, that's interesting. Why is that? Because it's high quality ingredients and you're not overeating, because you feel full at the end of a small quantity of food. And the low histamine diet really does plug into that concept.
That's great. So you've been doing it for a while, have you?
Yes, and I noticed that when I do it, if I do it correctly and I really do it, I'm a size 10. And if I get if I lapse, and it's a bit of this and a bit of that, and I don't quite stick to it quite, because I'm a bit, I like to be normal, because I don't want to be a kind of genetic goddess that sits there at a size 4 going, well, it's me. Yeah. I'm like, do you know what? I am a bit like, I'm not that great. I do eat my kids' leftovers, and I will have some crisps. I had some last night.
I mean, nobody can stick to the low histamine diet. Is pretty complicated as well, isn't it? It's, I still have to find myself looking at that list on the site and saying, artichokes, are they low histamine or not? It's quite random, isn't it?
It is a bit, although there are some basic principles, so not to put anyone off. I mean, obviously you've got a book on this now, so hurrah. Because
it's my company that's got a book rather than me individually.
Right, the company. But nonetheless, the book exists. Yeah. Okay, so therefore in the book it's laid out, but there are some basic rules to follow, which is nothing that's been sat around.
Yeah.
Preferably nothing in plastic whatsoever. No kind of dried or pickled foods or anything with vinegars or something like that, or anything smoked. So anything that's preserved, but anything fresh. Anything fermented.
Kefir. I used to think I was being so healthy having kombucha.
Yeah, me too. No way.
It's the worst.
And interestingly, because when I started the low histamine in August, okay, in the summer, and I did it really strictly, and then I had to go to Japan, interestingly, for work. And now the Japanese cuisine is unbelievably healthy, as everyone knows, blah,
Yes.
blah, blah, but they have a lot of miso and
a lot of
fermented
histamine
food.
in the
a lot
fish.
of histamine.
Yeah.
And I really like Japanese food.
Yeah.
And I
Oh,
thought,
that's great.
do you
Yeah.
know what? I'm here. I'm just going to enjoy myself. And you know what? I went up to a size 12 in a 5-day period. And my body immediately bloated up. And I was a bit wobbly when I came back and couldn't quite get back into the flow of where I was. I was just a bit off kilter with it all. And it was interesting. It wasn't until you wrote a piece, literally, I think it was a week ago, about your holiday and about the fast. And it's funny, you inspired me. And I thought, oh, do you know what, Katie, just get a grip, just for goodness sake. And literally, I just did like a day where I just delayed the breakfast to just get my digestion kind of remembering where it was before. And then immediately it just kind of clicked back in. And then suddenly I was back in the right zone again. And guess what? My body's gone back down again. And so I know for a fact that basically and what I love about the low histamine, having dieted my entire life and been in a whole roller coaster of I can't have this, I'm not allowed that, and it's not fair because I put weight on so easily, therefore I don't get to eat anything because my portions were minute all the time. That low histamine, as long as you're eating the right foods, you can eat loads.
Oh God, yeah.
And I am naturally quite greedy.
Yeah.
So I like a nice big plate of food. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I don't, because I do. My whole family, we're all quite greedy, you know, watching us at dinner time, also, like everyone's eating, you know.
Yes.
But as long as I'm eating, say, burrata as opposed to cheddar, you know, which then becomes my lunch with a fresh pear, then I'm not picking or miserable about the fact that I'm missing out on something else, because it's such a delicious thing to eat in the first place. I think, I can't believe I get to eat a whole burrata, that's so greedy. But you can.
And I think that's the thing, anyone listening who's thinking, oh God, it sounds awful, I can't have cheddar. Actually, if you want to follow a low histamine diet, no you can't. But you feel so much better if you don't.
And there's other cheese.
Yes.
Which is, and I promise you, anyone listening, it's the best. You feel so clean.
Yeah.
And when we were talking back about the whole circulation, so, you know, as we said earlier, that the key to health is the free flow of circulation. That's the number one thing to do. And the second point to know is think about the quality of your circulation, because if it's going everywhere, it needs to be healthy circulation. And these histamine markers need to be low. And the inflammatory response needs to be low. Inflammation, we know, is causing all modern day illnesses. Or if it's not causing them directly, it's got a massive role to play.
Yeah.
So and traditional culture knew this, which is why across the world there are infinite numbers of inflammatory reducing practices that people used to do, even going to a temple and breathing in frankincense, or washing in the Ganges, or a hot and cold banya in Russia, or, you know, saunas and followed by rolling in snow, or those hot houses in Mexico. What are they?
Yes.
I can't remember what they're called now. Those things where you go into the... Sorry, I'm waffling. Never mind. You know what I mean. Steam rooms. No, what are they called?
Where you have a ceremony.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's in a thing, and it's like a hot thing. Anyway, it doesn't matter, but it's a spiritual thing. But the point is, those practices, what are they doing? They're clearing inflammation.
Yes. They're
raising the spirit and clearing inflammation. And that's what they do. And then ultimately, the diet naturally in those days was a low histamine diet, because... Okay, you've just said, well, hang on, that doesn't make sense, Katie, because in Japan it's a high histamine diet. Yeah, but their lifestyle was very simple.
Would be fine if they caught the fish fresh.
Well, they caught the fish fresh, but it also, if you look at Japanese culture until the sort of, you know, the end of the 20th century, when it's kind of really sped up, it was a very minimalist concept in terms of things were very elegant and very, very simplified. And if you look at the Zen temples, everything's very calm.
Yeah.
So therefore the body isn't manically rushing around. Therefore the diet reflected how people lived to be healthy. So we in turn as a society need to look at how we indeed live. And we have, as we said about overscheduling, we have infinite sources available to us now, infinite choices available. So you have to choose wisely. You have to make scheduling choices wisely. You have to make dietary choices wisely. And thinking it's a calorie controlled diet and calories in versus calories out is really just a bit 1980s. You know, I'm not saying that you can stuff your face and sit around, because no, of course not. But the human body is designed to move, the circulation is designed to circulate, and the diet that we eat needs to reflect where we are as a society, which means it needs to be especially low inflammatory, which is the low histamine program.
Yeah.
And it works.
Yeah.
It does.
I'm really excited that you're into that as well.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of things that I want to ask you, but I'm not going to ask you now because it's not. Things,
Well, we'll
like,
leave
things like
everyone-
eggs. Do you eat them or not?
Well, do you want to quickly answer
Yeah,
that?
yeah, go
Okay,
on.
well, I'm very lucky because I live in the country and we rescue battery hens. As part of what we do, because we've got a very big, lovely field at the back of our house, and these poor little hens come in, no feathers, bleeding, absolutely strung out to an inch of their life. They're completely stressed when they come in, and they lay frantically for about a week. So if you ask me, do I eat eggs? I certainly don't eat those eggs because
Do
they
you
are
not? You
not.
oh
No,
my goodness!
not the first,
because they're the stressed eggs.
Well, they are so stressed. So
Yeah.
if we think about a histamine system, if you go and eat a battery-produced egg, which if you're not super careful, it's likely to be, and we're miscommunicated about the definition of free range and organics, you'll be really picky about where you're getting your eggs from. So companies like Abel and Cole or Riverford or even Dalesford, if you can, it's a bit expensive, but Abel and Cole, has got, it's a responsible supermarket practice, so you know where the environment the chickens, and which means if the chickens are relaxed and happy, they're going to produce relaxed, happy eggs. What then happens to the chickens is that they after 3 days of frenetically laying, they stop laying altogether for about a month, 2 weeks to a month, where they just fatten up, grow their feathers back, get used to the fact that they're actually in an environment where they can walk about and scratch about and do what they're naturally supposed to do, and then slowly but surely start to lay one egg every 2 days of superb quality. I've got some here, I'll give you a box. Dark, in fact, I've actually done a thing on this for my Instagram, showing you the difference between an egg from my back garden and
I'm going to look at that.
I'll show you. It's not up yet, but it will go up soon.
Okay, cool, yeah,
but it's
I like your Instagram.
So the point, thank
Especially
you. I like
dressed up in yellow.
I know, my yellow goddess. I look absolutely. And you know what? That's going to be the thing, isn't it? When I end up one day on national telly, that'll be what I'll have to wear. I'll think, oh great, I look ridiculous. But anyway. But eggs.
So the stress
produced
hormones in the food themselves are lowered once the hens are happy.
Of course. Of course. And again, the great master Mantak Chia, he always is talking about animal cruelty. And I absolutely agree with him. Aside from the inhumane practices in our farming industry, no disrespect to farmers, it's not their fault. It's the world that we've ended up in, and it's so cruel. Hence why this ginormous movement of veganism. But I personally am not vegan, because I've got chickens in my back garden, and I look at my chickens and think they have the best life. They do. They get all our scraps, they're scratching, they're having the loveliest time, and they lay eggs and we eat them. Well, that's a symbiotic relationship which everyone's okay with. I absolutely am vehemently, actively against battery farming on any nature. All the cruel practice of abattoirs and how we rear, never mind how we kill them, which is bad enough, how we rear these poor animals in the first place. They are stressed to an inch of their life because it's so cruel what we're doing to them, that what do we think happens to the meat that we then consume? Well, not we, because I don't eat that, but that people consume. It's stuffed full of stress hormones with high histamine levels, which we then eat ourselves. So even if the low histamine program will say, well, you can eat fresh meat, you can eat fresh fish, you can, but the reality is if that meat is poor quality, i.e. if it's cheap, it's cruel. It's that fat. It's that simple.
Yeah.
It's because I know, for example, with my jade crystals, the price I have to charge in order to ensure that the production line doesn't involve child labour, slave labour, animal cruelty. I've been through all of that. I'm responsible with what I'm doing. But there's many people out there that just look at price point and they go, I just want to spend £2 on a jade crystal, or I just want to buy sausages for 50p because they're cheap. And you think, okay, but let's look at the even if you don't care about the suffering of the animal, just be selfish about it. Do you want to eat that suffering? Because that's going into your body.
Yes, yeah.
And you're eating it.
Yeah.
It's going into your blood and it's feeding your system. So even from a selfish point of view, we need to, as we said earlier, the whole world needs to eat about half as much and up the quality. Because if we all committed to that, nobody would be overweight. Our overindulgent related diseases would immediately reduce, and there wouldn't be such a level of suffering in the world. And the energy of suffering is, we are living this. I'm not sounding all woo-woo here. We know energy exists. I mean, for goodness sake,
oh God, no. And actually, they've tested the quality of meat from factory farmed chickens, cows, whatever it might be, and you can see the stress in the meat. The quality of the meat is just not as good.
Of course, I mean it's absolutely
the
logical.
Hormones in the meat as well.
Well, aside from the hormones and the antibiotics,
Yes.
but just from a low histamine point, which is kind of our mutual point of absolute excitement, is if you want to eat a low histamine diet, you need to keep your stress response low yourself and consume food that doesn't inflame that. And any low quality, poorly produced produce is going to do that. So the low histamine diet ultimately is about eating very good quality food. And that ties in, to answer your question from a Chinese perspective, into Chinese health practices for eating, which is don't overeat, that's like fasting. The reason we do the 2-day fast is because the rest of the week we eat a bit too much.
Yeah.
And if you just eat less at each meal, you will naturally be hungry at the next meal, which is what the body is designed to do. Which means if you eat half as much, you can afford to spend twice as much on what it is you're buying. Which in turn means that the animals they don't need to be intensively reared because there's only half of them required. You can double the space. And that solves the problem, not to mention the fact that the energetics of the world that we live. So for you to be at your very best and me to be at mine, and anyone listening to here to be inspired by what we're talking about, to be at theirs too, changes the dynamic for everybody.
Yeah.
I'm not being a hippie. It's just where we are. We're in the 21st century now. We know this stuff. It's been proven. Look at Gaia, look at The Matrix, look at anything. Look at loads of Hollywood films they now make.
Yeah, and that's the same. I mean, look, we've recorded for an hour, so we should
my
probably
Lord
wrap
above.
up.
Never
but I always
stops.
think that's the same as wealth, isn't it? Wealth is not just the money in your pocket; it's how your community is as well. I mean, there's no point in having £1 million if everyone's begging outside your front door, is there? It's pretty blatant, and that's in terms of the meat that you eat and everything else.
Absolutely,
as well.
and also, just concluding on the wealth and going back to our original subject, which is overscheduling. If you're time poor, that's poverty.
Yeah.
So we all have to sort of, take a bit of a thought about how we are actually living our lives, because it is our life. It isn't, and the thing is, because we live long lives, we just take we don't die anymore. Not really. People used to die all the time. We lived around death, but now people sort of die when they're old, and we sort of think we just take it for granted, but don't. Because it is, every day is our life. Mm.
Well, I'm going to put this podcast on the histamine-intolerance.net site. And I've asked you before, but I'm going to ask you again. What is one book that you would recommend, and one tip for living with more energy?
Well,
it can be a book that you've read recently, or it can be a book that's had like a massive impact on you, or it can be a fiction book if there's something that you've read recently.
Well, obviously there's my book, and obviously there's your low-histamine book too.
Yes, yeah.
But aside from those,
by the way, I gave away copies of your book on my mailing list, and I've had so many emails from people extremely grateful, even taking selfies with their copy of the book.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Well, I love my book, but obviously I spent a long time writing it. But aside from that, the author that I absolutely love is Mantak Chia. Yes. He's a grandmaster, and he's spent many years writing multiple books. And probably his main book is called The Healing Love of the Tao. And it's quite a big book, but it's a really good introduction into the higher levels of Chinese medicine. My book is very much about an introduction to just really get people clear on the basics. But when you go to the Grandmaster, his knowledge is incredible, and it's a fascinating book that takes you deep into the energetics of the human body and the spiritual practices of mankind, and this incredible ancient medicine system that is still largely intact and available to us today. So that's what's inspired. That's really what inspired me all those years ago.
He teaches in Thailand, doesn't he?
He does. He has
we almost went on one of his courses.
He does come to London, though.
Does he?
He comes every year. It's worth signing up to his website, and he goes to Berlin a lot as well.
Right.
But he's in London at least once a year.
And what's your tip then?
My tip. Sorry, I forgot. Well, of course, tapping. Sorry, I have to say that because its circulation is key. So
I think that's been a really good theme for this podcast, hasn't it? Katie, where can people find out more about you, tapping, everything else that we've talked about today?
Well, there's two. There's Katie Brindle,
yes.
I'm on Instagram, and that's very much brought to life by my Instagram.
I recommend your Instagram.
Thank you.
Especially the yellow outfit. Yeah.
And then there's the Hey You method.
Sometimes I just watch them with the sound off just to amuse myself.
I know. I would. Honestly, it is ridiculous. I do look completely ridiculous. And do you know what? When I bought that yellow onesie, I was skiing, and my friends were laughing their heads off. You are never going to wear that. What did you buy that for? You're never going to wear it. And now it's become a thing on Instagram.
Yeah.
And then the Hey You method is obviously the brand that I've created off the back of my knowledge, which is all about these self-treatment techniques like toothbrushing. So that's the Hey You method. Yeah,
good. Well, look, we'll record another one before Glastonbury.
I hope so. Yeah.
I've got one more question.
Yeah.
What do you put in this tea? Because it's like crack.
I know.
I don't normally drink tea, but it is strong.
It's delicious, isn't it? Well, it's not. Do you know what it is? It's the good quality water.
It's got caffeine in it, though.
Only very, very light.
Really?
So it's only gentle. And if you
I feel like quite jacked up by it.
Well, good.
It's nice.
Okay, I think we're inspired by our conversation.
Yeah,
but if you look on my Instagram, I did a post on tea. I don't know if you saw it. It's worth watching because that's now you've asked about the tea. I did a whole 10-minute thing about how we are making tea incorrectly and how beautiful a drink it is if done properly. Good quality water and loose leaves. And you've
lovely.
just, I know, and it is, and
yeah.
it's something everyone can do.
Yeah, it's really good. Okay, we could carry on talking,
and
but we'll do another one soon.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Katie.
Bye.
That's it for Zestology. Thank you to Katie, and thank you for listening as well. Thank you to my partners, Sunlight and Saunas, and good to hear that a sauna got a little mention in that podcast as well. If you head over to Sunlight and check out all their research, all their articles on why it's good for you. Katie's a fan, obviously, and remember, if you mention Zestology, you'll get £200, $200 off. And just one more time, if you are interested in the histamine stuff that we were talking about, it's very much a passion project for me. Something on the side, something different. I know it's not for everybody, which is why I don't push it too much in this podcast, but it was fun to talk about it today. And if you're wondering, hang on, do I have histamine intolerance? You can head to histamineintolerance.net. It's my site, but it's just a sister site to the stuff that I normally do. And you can take a test. A little quiz, take you a couple of minutes to do the quiz, it's not very long, and you will soon know if histamine intolerance is something that you might want to look at as well. I am jacked after that tea that Katie gave me. I know she said it wasn't very strong in caffeine, but it's brilliant, it's quite powerful. So yeah, I'll go and enjoy the rest of my day jacked up on Katie's tea, and thank you for listening to Zestology. See you next time.